Let me just mention something before I introduce Vartan Gregorian, and that is that this, like every Global Philanthropy Forum conference, turns out to be a moment of great invention. And one of the inventions that occurred in the last couple of days is that John Morgridge got a notion. And John Morgridge's notion is that we should descend on Washington. And so my response, and of course I love the idea, but we spend a few weeks putting together the program. We spend all year identifying you and bringing you together, because you are what makes the Global Philanthropy Forum what it is. And so what we're going to do is ask you the question, ask you to answer the question that's not on your feedback form, and that is, were we to hold a session like this in Washington, would you make it a priority to come? So if you would let us know.
We will.
Now, we're very lucky. We've had the company for the past couple of days of Vartan Gregorian, who has taken out his time for us. And now we've got the opportunity to have a conversation with him. Just a little bit of background. Vartan Gregorian was born in Iran. He received some of his earlier education in Lebanon. He then traveled to Stanford, to the United States, to get his undergraduate degree and his PhD here at Stanford. He's an historian. He's taught at the University of San Francisco, San Francisco State, at UCLA, at the University of Texas at Austin, and at the University of Pennsylvania before becoming provost there. He made his splash in New York. He basically took over New York as president of the New York Public Library, had a transforming effect on that institution, and then served with equal distinction for 9 years as president of Brown University. He's then joined the Carnegie Corporation of New York in 1997. So please join me in welcoming Vartan Gregorian.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
I am tempted, Greg, because I call you Greg, to ask you why. When you first came to Stanford, you met people for the first time who had a number after their name. Could you say a word about why you became...
When I arrived at Stanford, I saw George McIntosh the fourth, somebody fifth, somebody third, and I thought only kings and popes were entitled to have numbers. So I introduced myself as Greg the 11th, Gregory the 11th. That did not go so well. But the reason Stanford people call me Greg and others Vartan, because Americans have bad habit of shortening names. So when I came first as freshman, they said, "Hi, Vart." I said, "No, please, call me Greg. If you're going to shorten my name, shorten my last name rather than my first name." That's the difference.
You have argued that foundations are in the idea business, that they're about generating knowledge, disseminating knowledge, and applying knowledge. And so what I thought we'd do is go through some of the pressing issues of the day and ask you where new knowledge needs to be created, where existing knowledge needs to be applied. And start first with what is referred to as the war on terror, and ask you the question, if Al-Qaeda is the enemy, do we understand the enemy? Do we understand its motivations? Or by dismissing it as evil, are we avoiding the hard work of getting to understand what drives it?
That's a very easy question, of course. One of the problems we face in American society that we don't have a historical sense. We recall what David Bell called presentist. We pick a present phenomenon and try to trace it back, rather than deal with the phenomenon and go forward, see its evolution. So it's a crisis mentality. Suddenly we discovered Al-Qaeda, suddenly we discovered fundamentalism, suddenly we discovered this, until the next crisis du jour comes. So one of the things I've been frustrated in our conception of Al-Qaeda and Muslim world and other things, how little we know about the region, how little we know about the history of peoples, Muslim peoples, how little we know about the Basques, because terrorism is not confined to only Muslim world, but the Basque region, Corsica, Ireland, and not to mention various other movements, to know what causes people to commit terror. Second, I have a different conception of, I should say, the war on terror. I, for one, believe that Osama bin Laden has not declared war against the United States. He's committed acts of terror against the United States. And I, for one, believe it was a big mistake to elevate him to the warrior status, that he's declared war against the United States. Because warriors, if not defeated, can claim victory. Terrorists, always on the run as fugitives, cannot claim victory. And I, for one, thought 25 million was too high for his head. It should have been $2,500. You know, as a common criminal who's committed acts of terror is on the run, because that would have brought his stature among his tribesmen, his people, and so is the lowest common denominator. But in order to think like this, you have to know anthropology, you have to know history, you have to know the value system of the region, in order not to elevate someone, but to put him in the proper perspective. As far as Al-Qaeda is concerned, I think it's a loose association. Even though Palestinian issue is resolved, Kashmir issue is resolved, that movement will continue because its main aim, alleged, or at least announced about aim, is not to just do away with Saddam Hussein. Ironically, they were against Saddam Hussein. Do away with all the secular power within Muslim world. Instead, bring one fundamentalist regime with 1.2 billion people, one resource, the oil fields, one scientific mind, and therefore I believe it's wrong for us to consider Muslim world as an organic entity. That's why I wrote Islam a mosaic, not a monolith, because ironically cold warriors and fundamentalists speak the same language. Cold warriors say Muslim world, for some, has replaced, green menace has replaced the red menace. Fundamentalists, on the other hand, also agree that we're 1.2 billion. Cold warriors also say Muslims are, world is 1.2 billion. So for different reasons, both of them stress the unity, because Al-Qaeda's aim is to establish a new caliphate, to bring one ummah, one community, one rule on the basis of Quran and so forth, and that's not what the Muslim world is about.
I'm going to ask you to switch your microphone from this lapel to that.
All right, I will do that. Whatever you say.
No. Here, I'll do it for you. I'll do it for you, so it doesn't. And I'll ask you a question as we go, and that is, I wanted to ask about it. You mentioned your book, which is an extraordinary. It's a wonderful book. I commend it to everyone. It started as an essay on Islam, and then the Brookings Institution put it out as a book. But in it, you refer to the challenges that Muslim societies face. And I'm wondering how important the Arab Development Report has been, whether it provides any possible agenda for philanthropy or for possible partnership between governments and philanthropists.
I think it's a very courageous document, self-analysis, but it should be used as self-analysis for action to improve rather than self-confession how bad we are. Because there are two approaches to that report. One saying, you see, even Arab world concedes how inferior they are, rather than how courageous it is on their part to analyze and propose a line of action. I think the important thing we should stress that the secularism is not alien in the Arab world. Science is not alien in the Arab world. You know, those of you who go to Spain, you will know from Cordoba and Granada and elsewhere, or if you go to Cairo, you know the first university in modern sense in the world was in Cairo, not in Bologna. It was done under Fatimids. But we have to know all of this to show that Islam has gone straight rather than straight. And this is what the report says. The issue struggle now in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, all over the world, traditional societies, between the secularists and religious fundamentalists. If secularists cannot provide the solutions, religious fundamentalists are ready to provide simple solutions on the basis of catechism, which has answers for everything. So this report, in my opinion, is a very courageous report, and action should follow. Otherwise, it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy that we cannot cope with our own progress. Now, the other thing is, democracy is a very important concept. But democracy needs institutions. Democracy is not one man, one vote, or one woman, one vote, because people confuse that. That if there is a voting, even free voting, you have democracy. Democracy needs institutions, legal systems, protection of minority, fundamental rights, like Bill of Rights, and all kinds of things, which have been clamored for many years, but have not been implemented for various obvious reasons. Because we treat the whole region as one, it's not. You have different societies at different levels of progress, development, and, for example, women have been elected president of Bangladesh. No woman has been elected president of the United States yet. Women have been elected president of India, or prime minister in Pakistan, Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, and so forth. We should know where the limitations are and where the limitations are not. So I believe we should not lump everything in one category. All of them are in the same stage of development, but some are way advanced and some are struggling. And what we should try to do is not to find one solution. Generic democracy is what needed all over the world, no matter which stage of development they are, because that's not what happened. We should follow the voice of history to see where impediments are and how the impediments can be removed. So Arab Development Program mentions where the impediments are. Now they need resources and will, political will, in order to implement it, and that will be a great boon to the entire Muslim world and developing world.
You know, President Bush has advanced the notion of remaking the Middle East and the Persian Gulf region in models of democracy. And I recall in your book you noted that the Sufi scholar Rumi wrote, start a huge, foolish project like Noah. And I'm wondering, is this a huge, foolish project like Noah, or will it be, will the ark be successful?
Well, again, I beg to differ, because let me just take Iraq as an example. Now, I hate to people who say, I told you so. But before we went to Iraq, in a big forum, I predicted, and I hate myself for doing this, everything that happened in Iraq, line by line. I said, it's easy to conquer a quagmire, but it's very hard to build edifices on a quagmire. Because, let me just show contradictions in building democracy. President Bush announced on the night of the invasion of Iraq, he appealed Iraqi army not to fight. And I remember the words, we're not your enemy, we're coming as liberators. And Iraq has 436,000 army personnel. So what do we do when we occupy? We disband the Iraqi army as a reward. Well, here is an army did not fight. 3 generals had defected to CIA and so forth. Why not keep them in the barracks? 430,000 people with their arms can be in barracks. If one of them revolts, you know how to punish them. Use them as patrol to streets, traffic, whatever you want. Give them salaries. By disbanding them, you already have begin Iraqi occupation by 2 million people, relatives of all the soldiers and officers and so forth, as enemy within, plus arms. Second, whoever has not read Shia religion, Shias are not like Sunni world. Forgive me if any Sunnis is. Sunnis are Protestants, like America. Anybody can open any mosque, give any opinion. Nobody will chastise them. It's one man's opinion. Shias cannot do that. They have a Vatican, they have a hierarchy. So for our administration to believe that we will go in Iraq and have Najaf to be antidote to Iran, that have 2 Shia polar fighting against each other, they are not studied. They have not even looked at Sistani's name. The first thing I looked at Sistani, I said, he's not from Iraq. You look at the map of the Iran, Sistani is born in Meshed, near Meshed in Iran. He's Iranian, and he's there. So now we suddenly discovered, then we say he's a quietist. Well, what does quietist mean? He's been quiet. So, until now. The other thing, if they knew the policy of hospitality, I don't go to Shamsu's home and say, here I am, you better accept me. I have to know that he will welcome me. So for Bremer and others asking to be seen by Sistani and Sistani refusing to meet them, he already has delegitimized American presence in Iraq. He will not meet with any American. And again, they should have studied beforehand. And then, well, anyway, the list is so long. Then you don't send dogs to sniff for weapons in Muslims' home. It would be as if you sent pigs to ultra-Orthodox Jewish homes to see whether drugs are there too. You have to know that the worst insult to a Muslim will be, even cow, you're son of a dog. They don't say son of a pig. Both of them are the same level. So if they knew about these things from the beginning, they would do what British always did. They become occupying power, but they have others execute their policies, even though I don't agree with that. So now we put ourselves in a terrible situation that a religious leader dictates American policy in Iraq. We never anticipated. They were supposed to be our allies. And they were compared, by the way, to Northern Alliance. In Afghanistan, Northern Alliance had been fighting for 20 years. There's no comparability there. And the last thing I will tell you about Iraqi situation, President Bush calls Iraqi nation, which is good. But then everybody divides it. They said Sunnis, Shias, Kurds, and Turkmen. Even New York Times. Nobody bothers to say that Kurds and Turkmen are also Sunnis. So if the struggle turns into Shia and Sunni one, we're going to have a religious warfare, not civil warfare. But these are things State Department people know. Well, unfortunately, I'm told that Pentagon thought they could do better job than the State Department. As a matter of fact, I told my friends in the State Department that in my book, The Road to Home, I wrote about incident that my high school principal, when I spoke too much like I'm doing now, said, first, know about what you're talking, and second, be brief. But he also told me, if you don't know about the subject, remember the painter who gave an exhibition of life-size portraits. And somebody came to this exhibition and said, are you the painter? Yes, sir. I said, shoelaces are not made that way. So what's your profession, sir? I'm a shoemaker, he said. So the painter picked the brush and fixed the shoelaces. And then he said, I don't like the mustache. And the painter said, please, sir, do not rise above the shoe. So State Department should tell everybody, do not rise above the shoe, because I think they're doing this service to President Bush and all the others by not having a coherent policy. And by leaving Iraq now in a way we'll be living, nobody has a credibility. As a matter of fact, I told Iranian here, of Iranian background, I said, United States should send a bill to Iran. So what are you talking about? For Gulf War II. Because the biggest beneficiary of it has been Iran. Before Gulf War II, there was Saddam Hussein on the one hand with 30,000 mujahideen ready to invade Iran, Taliban and Pakistan on the other hand. Now I'm Iranian, I look back, Islamic Republic on my left, Islamic Republic on my right, and United States people not willing to make another invasion of another country that's going to cost $198 billion and plus, especially on the eve of presidency. So actually, if I were Iranian regime, I would also suppress the reformists and so forth, because even when President thanked, extended his condolences to Iranians at Bam, the earthquake, if he had said, again, somebody should have advised him, if he had said, we have differences, but when it comes to life, and I'm citing conservative language, when it comes to life, life is sacred, and any death diminishes, quote, down everybody else, because no man is an island. If he had said this, extend his condolences to Iranian people, and not mention politics, that would have a tremendous boost to reformers and others that America cares for Iranian people. But somehow somebody who had written his speech could not resist that we did regime change, the same speech, and we did this and that, so therefore it was used to say Iranians, Americans, look Iranians, Americans even cannot express condolences of this tragic loss without injecting politics in it. At home, we would have not done that. But somehow abroad, we think there are different people, different mentalities.
I'm going to take you to... I'm going to take you to philanthropy's role, because I think back to the post-World War II era, where Carnegie looked around and concluded that we didn't have sufficient knowledge base about the Soviet Union, about this new superpower, that we didn't know enough about Russian culture, we didn't know enough about its history, its language, and it went about with other major foundations setting up centers for Russia studies and for and creating the field of Kremlinology. Do we need a similar kind of investment when it comes to better understanding the Arab and Muslim world? And is it philanthropy's role to build that kind of national capacity?
I think the United States always has been strong for having diverse voices, diverse centers, studying diverse phenomena. Dating back, by the way, to Vannevar Bush in 1946, 47, when issued The Endless Frontier. He was to advise Roosevelt and later Truman how to organize science in the United States. And that had a dramatic impact on entire higher education, including this university, because Vannevar Bush recommended that science not be concentrated in the government's hands, like Europe, institutes and so forth, but to be put in universities in order to bring competition and train future generation of scientists to graduate students who take part in the research in the universities, rather than having, like Soviet Union, various institutes. The same thing is true about social sciences. Russian research centers at Columbia, Harvard, and elsewhere that Carnegie helped establish. But now we have many Middle East centers, study centers, but not enough Muslim studies, Islamic, because we have our entire, it pains me to say this, 10% of Muslim world is Arab, 10%. 90% of our preoccupation has been with Arab because of Arab-Israeli issue. We've not dealt with Indonesia. To the best of my knowledge, there will be 1 or 2 universities that teach even history in Indonesia. But I'm consoled, they said there are only 1 or 2, 3 institutions that even teach history of Canada. But Canada I can understand, but Indonesia I cannot. And therefore, centers we have. The important thing is how to allow these centers freely to debate with the government or without government, to have antidotes, to challenge, because that's what has been helpful in science, and that's what will be helpful in social sciences. Second, we are going to do at Carnegie again, and I'm happy to announce, we're going to try to see, we're examining, to republish all the major Muslim works, by secular writers, in 19th and 20th century, classic, to see which ones are out of circulation, buy their copyright, and put them on the web for the entire Muslim world. Something like 100, 200 maybe volumes of the major works, in order to teach everybody that this problem is not a modern problem. It's been going on since Napoleon landed in Egypt, how to reconcile science and progress with religion, how to organize the countries, and also to teach people, and it's being facetious now, not to copy from General Maud's speech when British general, when he landed in Iraq 1920, he said, "We will not stay more than 1 day necessary." 20 years later, they left British after many losses. But whoever wrote President's speech did not know. There are some historians know all these lines. And he copied, I'm sure, from General Maud's speech. We will not stay 1 day more. That was disastrous in Iraq because they remember that sentence. So anyway, mistakes of that sort could not be done. And the last point I'd like to tell you that along with history, one has to study value system. One of the things we're great, America is great, is generosity. One thing we're not great, we don't save face. Face saving is the most important thing in all traditional cultures. Sure, you have defeated me, but allow me the dignity of saving my honor. The movie, I don't know how many of you remember, in 1960s to 70s, The Best of Enemies, David Niven and Cardi, the Italian comic. Italian unit wants to surrender in North Africa, but they want a military parade. Banned. And David Niven, British General Major, said, "My God, they have been defeated. Why are they insisting?" Well, their honor requires. So we understand that. The same thing in Muslim societies and other societies, Latin America, I did not even mention, the same kind of attitude. You defeat, they know they have been defeated. You don't have to advertise. But because of home consumption, we have to parade the naked bodies of the victims, which we will never do here. We don't allow our dead soldiers to be filmed when they come to Dover now. But we don't mind to say that the body is also as sacred or as valuable for the victims of all faiths, and therefore you don't film them to show how courageous we have been and so forth. Of all the things I can advise, if I could advise State Department, the American government, save the face of people you're defeating, and they'll cooperate with you. They'll be grateful to you because you're sensitive to their cultural and other acumen.
Of course, in the immediate post-war World War II era, we did redefine the relationship between victor and vanquished.
Yes.
With respect to with the Marshall Plan. What is philanthropy's role in helping to rebuild these war-torn societies of Afghanistan, Iraq?
Well, I am an activist, so I hope I don't offend anyone. Activists need solid scientific base, research, scholarship, because scholarship and research are giving context for the past and continuity for the future. Otherwise, you may make many mistakes. I love, actually, James Watson, the inventor or discoverer of the DNA, once with great pride told me, Gregorian said, we have learned how to make, not to make things 95 different ways. They were all wrong, but we learned how not to repeat it. We have to know the facts in order not to repeat mistakes. And that brings me to say we have also to confess our mistakes. I have proposed that every year we pick up one case that we failed and advertise. It's such an alien idea among foundations.
That Carnegie did.
Carnegie. I intend to do this. I already have. So now, one other thing I'd like to mention, that Abraham Flexner wrote a wonderful piece I'd like you to read. The usefulness of useless knowledge. Usefulness of useless knowledge. There's no such thing as useless knowledge, as Senator Proxmire discovered to his great chagrin when he used to give Golden Fleece Awards. Knowledge is important. So at Carnegie, we invest in knowledge, we incubate ideas, and we provide models to be tested and to be copied or to be emulated. Without that research, I'm afraid there'll be lots of waste. So research is, and science and learning are fundamental. So people who say, spend all the money because needs are now, that's why I said we spend in ideas, not just needs. Everybody has needs. But ideas in the long run are going to be used as formidable forces for mobilization, as well as implementation, as well as partnerships. What brings you together is not need alone, but is idealism and partnership.
Vartan, many of the dangers that we've discussed over the past 2 days require multidisciplinary analysis and understanding. And that's something Carnegie early on made investment in the Center for International Security and Cooperation here at Stanford, a similar institution at MIT, a number of centers of excellence, the purpose of which was to combine the social and hard sciences to look at issues like emerging infectious diseases, environmental issues. But you're a scholar, you know that the structure of academia is such that all the incentives are in sticking to your home discipline. That's how you get ahead. Is it part of philanthropy's challenge to create a different incentive system?
Yes. First of all, academy is the most conservative institution. You should know that. They can discuss about revolution in China. They can discuss revolution in India, revolution everywhere except their department, except curricular reform. Woodrow Wilson, who was president of Princeton, that's where he learned his ability to become president of the United States. He said, it's easier to transfer an entire cemetery than to make curricular reform. Now, it's very hard, especially now, because we have tremendous explosion of information. All available information, we're told, doubles every 2 years. If that's the case, we use only 5% of all available information. Universities also, because of explosion of knowledge and specialization, are fragmenting the departments to sub-specialties. Specialty is necessary for progress, scientific and other progress, but there has to be synthesis. Ortega y Gasset wrote once, barbarism of specialization, but we did it. How to structure information into knowledge and how to distill from that knowledge wisdom is what T.S. Eliot so famously put it. That's our challenge. So therefore, interdisciplinary work is essential all over in our universities. And foundations and corporations can give incentive to universities to say, we're going to give you a grant, but our appointment has to be in 3 departments. That's what I used to do at Penn and at Brown. Martha Nussbaum was member of 3 departments. Somebody else, 4 departments. Unfortunately, interdisciplinary work is allowed for full professors to become prominent, but not lecturers and assistant professors, because reward system does not reward them. And as a result, one nice thing about American academy is, as long as interdisciplinary works, there are new departments emerge, such as computer science emerge from applied math, microbiology, and so forth. So that's the good part. But in order to emerge as interdisciplinary learning, you need to put investments in the universities and higher education. Higher education is very important and should not be neglected, but there's some kind of incentives have to be given to break the barriers and deal with the issues in an integrated manner.
Okay, well that's here. How about in an emerging democracy like Russia? Carnegie has made some pretty systematic investments, as has Soros, as have others, in the hard sciences in Russia to try to preserve the science and technology community there so as to assure that it will have a basis for economic development as well as to prevent weapon scientists selling their knowledge to the highest bidder. What about the social sciences? What role does that play, and how do you connect? Well,
we have been traditionally concerned since 1946 on Soviet-American relations, bringing scientists together first, and then bringing generals, Soviet generals and American generals together, because they're very important to know each other. Only diplomats know each other, but not generals. So we're bringing to Harvard for many years generals to get to know each other. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union, we decided to support regional universities in former Soviet Union. We have now 14 universities we're supporting. The Russians call provincial universities, I call regional universities, so do them. In Siberia and elsewhere, in order to keep the infrastructure of Russian intelligentsia. The Soviet Union had many faults, but investment in science and scholarship was not one of them. As a result, we want to keep as many of humanists and social scientists in the universities in order to strengthen democratic foundations of Russia. For that reason, MacArthur Foundation, Soros in the past, as you don't know, they're in trouble with Russia, and us have been supporting this, but with one condition. We wanted Russians to have ownership of that. So therefore, a Russian board is doing that, but we hold the finances to Kennan Institute in Washington, because we cannot directly invest in non-Commonwealth countries. Second, we also have given them computers and others, but most important of all, I think what has happened, books in social sciences, because they have lots of books in humanities, but not in social sciences. And as a result, we have now viable universities there, and we encourage case through cases integration of learning within those universities. Because one of the problems in the Soviet Union was all research was done in institutes, not universities. But now all research we're transferring from the institutes into universities, the way it's been doing in America. And they need incentives. The same thing we're doing in Africa. One of the things I was interested, not who is doing, which all foundations are interested, whose picture will be there, whose headline, but what is to be done. I don't give a damn, I call forgive it, who does it, but what is to be done. As a result, 4 foundations we got together, each one was a program in Africa, MacArthur, Carnegie, Rockefeller, and Ford, and we said we'll coordinate our efforts in a 10-year program, $100 million, We already in 3 years, we have spent 60 billion. We're supporting 14, 15 major universities in Africa. And because the needs are there for poverty, for this, but Africa also needs leadership. Otherwise, be importing only consultants and others. So I'm happy to tell you that also has taken hold, because our approach is we're not partners even. We are your allies. The money is yours, not ours. You tell us your priorities. We're not a donor agency. You tell us your priorities. You tell us how you like us to evaluate them. But you're responsible. If you don't perform, we'll unplug it. But not only unplug it, we'll be sure you don't get any money from anybody because you are failed the public trust of your country and ours. So far, we're happy also that we're present in sub-Saharan Africa. We're establishing libraries there and strengthening universities. And in Russia, I'm happy to tell you, we have built a great deal of goodwill, especially since we have made Minister of Culture a party to us. They have put in hard cash, dollars, not in Russian rubles, to match our effort. And they have been doing it, which is very rare. Those of you who are working in Russia know that.
What about the problem of corruption? Is there a certain amount that's part of the price of doing business?
Corruption is everywhere, unfortunately, because human nature either is desperate or insatiable. And we have to deal with it. And I have said in the past, if we lose 10%, 20% corruption, fine. We'll write it off. But I don't want to ignore it. One of the biggest problems I've faced is Nigeria, because I have been getting so much mail from Nigerians. One of them, very clever, one of them wrote to me, I'm the head of the Senate. I don't think he is. Confidential. And we would like your bank account. We'll place $60 million in your bank account, for which we'll give you $6 million. Now, if I took the deal, I lost a couple of $1,000 I have in my banking account. If I complain to FBI, I'll be arrested, because I was planning to defraud Nigerian government and American government. And therefore, I said no. But you don't respond. Because if you respond, they take your stationery, take the middle out, and put everything that you've not said with your signature there. So we had a big debate. Should we invest in Nigeria? And we said yes. We cannot ignore the largest African country in terms of population right off because of corruption. But at the same time, we have our accountants, but also more important than that, we have university professors whose future is at stake because this is their money. This is not somebody else's money. So we're fiercely fighting to keep the integrity of the grants. As long as there is that kind of healthy balance of terror, we'll invest in, but we are also to be courageous enough to say we failed and to withdraw. And that's the threat we have there.
I'm going to turn to some questions about philanthropy itself, because I know that we're at time. But first, I just want to note that most people in this room are in search of the points of leverage for them, and for a large institution like Carnegie, like the large foundations, the supporting research and scholarship, particularly higher education, is a possibility. But for smaller amounts, are the points of leverage at a different stage in the educational ladder, and is the point of need perhaps at an earlier stage, particularly if you look at the Arab Development Report, 1 out of every 4 Arabs is illiterate. Mm-hmm. Is that an opportunity for the people in this room?
That's an opportunity, but so is our national problems. We have tremendous problems in America. The new book of David Shipler, I don't know how many you have read, 35 billion Americans are below poverty. It came as a shock to me, frankly, because I always knew about 44 million Americans not being insured for health. But 35 million Americans below poverty line, it was staggering to me. And I'm reading halfway through. Now, So we're forced to balance international needs with domestic needs. And domestically, we have many partners. Internationally, unfortunately, that was the nicest thing of my being with you. Many foundations have withdrawn from international scene because they're controversial. Even this morning, I heard about 5% how to give. But Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, and others, if the 5% rule is removed, that you have to include all the overhead, exclude from it, they have to close some of their international offices because they're very costly. And you can easily write bigger checks to meet 5% demand to bigger causes than small ones because they need to be examined and administered and so forth. So one of the things we have used as a leverage to re-granting. We give to organizations a mini grant business because we don't have the time nor the resources to directly to be involved. We also get small things like this, but it's become big things. The African Women's Development Fund, we said, Andrew Carnegie said, when somebody is hungry, don't give them fish, give them a fishing rod. Fish makes them dependent on you. Fish becomes a charity. Give them a fishing rod in order to make a philanthropy. So for many years, we've been helping, and representative is here, African Women's Development Fund, and it's marvelous to see how much they've accomplished, that you have to have ownership of your own fate, your own destiny. You cannot just depend on outsiders, but outsiders provide means in order to allow you to become autonomous. That's the key issue, how to be autonomous rather than dependent. And most of our aid, unfortunately, creates dependence. And Carnegie's aim always has been, along with other foundations, including Rockefeller Brothers Fund, is here to make them independent, to make them. The same in democracy. If people are democratic opposers, we're surprised. Good for them. They are democratically elected governments who say, we don't like what America is doing. We have to also know with democracy comes independence. With independence comes disagreement or friendship or agreement on the basis of choice. And that's one of the things we're doing. We're investing in democracy, but we're investing in democratic institutions that are needed, such as South African Constitution, such as South Africa's infrastructure. We translated, for example, as a leverage with Minister of Education of South Africa, we helped translate all exams into all the dialects of South Africa in order to allow minorities who have been denied access to higher education to understand what it is. We have to rewrite, again, leverage with the publishers, New History of South Africa. But things are there if, on the other hand, you needed ownership. And one last thing I will mention, a leverage. Don't use the same consultants, sorry to offend some of you, same consultants all the time. But when I came to Carnegie, I said all consultants will be changed every 2 years. And I had read Eisenhower's dependency issue, military, industrial, and complex. I did not want between donors, donees, and consultants to be formed an alliance. Whether you fail or not, it always succeeds. So that checks and balances. The same thing we have insisted in developing countries. They provide the same kind of checks and balances.
I have two last questions.
Yes.
The first, that we've been talking about partnerships, we've been looking at different sectors, and I couldn't help but reflect over these 2 days that the private sector does have to focus like a laser on the bottom line. And elected officials have to respond to a pretty unforgiving public in a 24-hour news cycle. Is philanthropy's unique comparative advantage the fact that it can take risks and make long-term choices, that real investments in the public interest?
Yes. The only impediment we have is American impatience. We always for silver bullets, not for behavior. Just give me something, I get over my call, give me something, I get there, and so forth. We talk a good talk, but we don't walk the walk. That some of this decline of public schools, for example, has been 25, 30 years. We want it to be fixed right away, everywhere, without having central authority, by having 16,038 school systems, each with their own governing system, 50 states, and the federal bureaucracy and everything. not knowing that it will take time. Patience is important. Knowledge is important, but also you have to remember you're a big business now. Independent sector consists of 1.6 million organizations. 1 out of 11 Americans work for a nonprofit sector. More people work for higher education today than automobile, steel, textile, and few industries combined. So with that kind of power, we're talking about $350 billion enterprise. With that kind of power, political power, financial power, moral power, that sector can do a lot. Philanthropic sector can do a lot. But it's unfortunately timid sometimes, does not want to fail, and you cannot succeed if you're not ready to take risk and fail at the same time, and be honest about your failures so that others don't duplicate.
Last question. You've been an extremely successful grant seeker. You're now a grant maker. What does each community need to know about the other in order to do its job better?
Oh my God. Well, somebody asked me the difference, I think Peter, somebody asked me the difference between giving and seeking. I told your public library has my portrait. The chairman of the board said, it's not your portrait. I said, he's mine. Why? I said, for the first time you can see the backs of your hands. Because all my life I had been begging with open hands. And so I'm going to surprise you. I seldom ask for money as a fundraiser. I always discuss the issues. I never appeal to vanity. I always appeal to sense of civic purpose. I always told the high society of New York Public Library does not give class, it gives you class. Because that's the institution what it is. And that you are part of Andrew Carnegie's heritage, that with wealth comes public responsibility. That capitalists are trustees of public wealth. And therefore they have to reinvest, not in the form of charity, but in the form of philanthropy. So when I get impatient when somebody comes and does not know how to ask, then I put my asking hat, go tell him how he should or she should deal with me. Because they come, and I'm sorry to tell you this, they come for half an hour, 40 minutes. We talk about family, the world, the climate, and so forth. As they're ready to leave, they said, by the way, I have a proposal here. So now, when they come, I said, let's start with by the way first. It cuts the meetings into half. We discuss the proposal rather than the world. And second, if they ask little for little, I say, that's not, don't promise too much. Just promise what's possible. So now, as far as giving and receiving, I still think receiving is better than giving, because it's in the giving that we receive, as St. Francis Assisi mentioned. But my joy, only thing I'll mention, you can see sometimes you get accidental money. I wanted a big auditorium at New York Public Library from a storage room. Those of you have seen Bartos Forum. And I went to see Mr. and Mrs. Bartos for a cocktail for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So before you have dinner with Mrs. Astor, stop by our apartment, which is right below, have a drink with us. So they said, what's the biggest need of the New York Public Library? I said, auditorium. How much will it cost? I said, $5 million. They said, who has that kind of money? Well, I said, frankly, you have. Look at this Picasso, Miro, and so forth. Half of them will meet. And they laughed and so forth. And then, as I was leaving, they put their arms around me and said, you can count on us. And I said, this is like McGovern telling Eagleton, and 1,000% behind you, way, way behind. So I left. A couple of weeks later, I met them in the high society. They're very cool, because they knew the architect. I said, so what's the problem? They said, you're a very greedy one. And I said, why? Why are you curtailing the project? Because architect was a friend of theirs. I don't have the money. He said, didn't you hear that we said, you can count on us? I said, oh my God. You mean you gave me $5 million? They said, yes. I said, you must think I'm a real jerk without thanking you. So no, I said, just blasé about money. And you have to be. Money is a commodity. So you have to deal with each person, bring out in each person the highest aspiration that person has, rather than the lowest common appeal that you can make. That has been my privilege to do that.